Where do you think the trends are right now? Do you think there's one we're not talking about, and kind of how it'll affect the draft board?
Well, the trend, I mean, that's a good question, because the trend is always going to be who just won a Super Bowl or who were the hot teams and did they do anything that is unusual. And the Jahmyr Gibbs, you kind of alluded to it, Jahmyr Gibbs and the ability to match teams up specifically with an athlete on a linebacker, something like that. That's a really big deal right now, is finding the mismatches, finding an explosive player to play explosively. So to that end, I think that's one of the reasons why Travion Henderson from Ohio State could get a bump. Jaden Blue from University of Texas could get a bump. Another trend is going to be, hey, the Eagles, had 4 guys who could rush. They could rush with 4. We've got to really make rush a central part of it. Now, that sounds pretty basic, but where you get the rush from, like the interior, defensive tackles, guys who can rush from the interior, even if they're not great run stoppers, are going to have more value now, because teams will look at them as, sub-package players who can have big impacts on the game on passing down. So I think rush from the interior, mismatch running backs are one, and then I think bigger, stronger nickel cornerbacks. It used to be the nickel cornerback was going to be a smaller guy who could match up with smaller slot receivers. Now they're getting bullies out there because they want to be able to stop the run from a base package of a nickel base package. They want to be able to stop the run from there. But then so it needs to be a good run defender from the slot. But then you also have to have, a functional amount of movement skill so that you can play some man-to-man against either, slippery route runners or pass-catching tight ends, because you're going to see both of them out there in the slot.
Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, ESPN 97.5 in Houston, joining us here talking all things NFL mock draft. We'll get to the Cowboys pick, who you got at 12. But first pick that really jumped off, and like I said, I know you're as plugged in as anybody, but the one pick that kind of jumped off the page to me just early on is that you got the Raiders taking Jalen Walker from Georgia. Now, obviously, with Pete Carroll being a defensive guy, it certainly makes sense. I haven't seen anybody, and like you said, you typically mock a little bit different than other people. Are they not thinking quarterback, or what's kind of, from what you're hearing, what do you think the Raiders are going to do, especially if you got Jalen taking them at 6?
Freddie, I wouldn't read too much into that one. That one's total guess.
Oh,
but
okay.
What I tried to do is get into the head of the team. I tried to get into the Raiders brand. So I said, okay, Bobby Wagner was a big impact player so I go back to Pete Carroll in Seattle. What was a cornerstone of his defense? Beside the Legion of Boom, it was Bobby Wagner. Was a phenomenal run-fast linebacker who had dynamic ability to rush a passer as well, if need be. That's Jalen Walker. Like some people think he's an edge. Some people think he's a linebacker. What he is, he can play linebacker first and second, come off the, either blitz you on third down or come off the edge on third down. So he's got that capability. And I really thought, all right, Shedeur Sanders just isn't special as a quarterback. He's kind of average, really accurate. He's got a lot of intangibles I like, but he's more of a game manager. And you don't really take those guys with the 6th pick. And I just thought to myself, what they want to get culture turned around. How do you turn culture around? Let's look at a position they need. Let's think about culture. And a lot went into that. It was hard to find a 6th pick. Like, there was nothing that really fit very cleanly. And then I said, you know what? Let's go with the guy who is considered the culture changer at Georgia. They rave about Jalen Walker. He's got the ability to be a hybrid who can play, who can either rush or play linebacker. We just talked about got to be a hybrid player nowadays. It's about matchups and mismatches. And then, he's just really fast. So he's going to be able to scoop up a lot of tackles. He's just learning to play linebacker, and he got a lot better from last year to this year. So with that one, I was looking for a football culture changer because Tom Brady's in the building, and I'm trying to change culture. But I also want to play towards Pete, to Pete Carroll's success in the past, which was finding a guy on the second level who really made a huge impact. And that's where I came up with Jalen Walker.
Well, Lance, I'd be remiss if I didn't dive back into probably the most glaring thing about your mock draft. Fred already mentioned it about Shedeur at 29. And I just wanted to know if Josina Anderson's tweet had, if you saw that of her talking about a quarterback's coach from a team drafting in the top 7 referred to Shedeur Sanders as coming off as, in quotes, brash and arrogant in his team interview and making his assessment known to a number of people, and just kind of what you thought about that. If that is something you were hearing as well, if you wanted to add anything to it, and just if that also maybe played a factor into where you had him in your mock.
No, I didn't hear that, but I can tell you that I heard it myself from other people. That's one of those things where I talk to teams, and first of all, no one has him really as a first-round quarterback. So in any other draft, he wouldn't be a first-rounder. So now you're looking at a process where you got a guy in the first round because it's a need. Basically, you don't want to do it based on – you don't want to make any picks based on need. You want to believe you got a guy graded. He fits your need, but he also is graded there.
Yeah.
And I think the problem with Shedeur is, okay, he fails to meet that. Now you say, all right, well, he's a game manager, but he's accurate. He's got a lot of intangibles. Well, who wants to deal with a quarterback who you already know is going to come in the league with a podcast, right? He's going to come out, and we saw what's going on with Micah Parsons, with Paul George in basketball. You even have C.J. Stroud, who, frankly said, I was on too many podcasts. I was doing too much non-ball stuff in the off season. He's laid out his teammates on Twitch last year. This is his offensive lineman. His dad, one team told me this: if you draft Shedeur, you're drafting his dad too. And Dion is going to light up the coaching staff, the front office, the ownership if he's not happy with something. And their point to me was he has no elite traits. The juice didn't work to squeeze. There's no reason to have to deal with that. So once you get to that, he's not really – he doesn't grade as a top 10, top 15 type player. But once you get into the extra, is it worth it to draft him? Like, is he good enough to put up with all that stuff? And I think NFL teams are going to say no. And I'll tell you, the difference between him and Cam Ward on the field was just night and day. Now, Cam's a pretty serious guy. He's not real talkative. But the way he interacted, those two interacted with team personnel who were talking to them when they weren't working out during the workout on the field. But teams can just come up and kind of just start talking to them. I thought that was night and day. I was paying very close attention to that, and it was pretty noticeable.
Well, kind of go into that. Obviously, he has to get drafted somewhere. You have a mock to the Cleveland Browns at pick 29. Do you think that's the perfect fit for him as far as the culture that he's going into? Like, what kind of team is that the team that you do see him fitting into? Because he's obviously got to go somewhere.
No, I think with Shedeur you need so. There's some things I really like about him. He's a really confident player in the pocket. He plays with a great deal of poise. Like, there's some stuff I really like about him. He's an accurate passer. I think what you need is to have the right things around him. He needs to be blocked up. You need to have a couple of good targets who can separate. Even though he's an accurate quarterback, he doesn't have a plus arm. So you need some separation. And I'd prefer that he have a good tight end. Now, that was not something he had at Colorado, but it makes life so much easier when you have a big target that can kind of work the seam, work the middle of the field. So I think you need to have the right things around him. He's not a guy that can put a team on his back. Few quarterbacks, frankly, are in the league. So I don't think the Browns would be the greatest situation for him. I think now in my scenario, they get Travis Hunter with number 2. So I think that definitely helps having those two guys together.
Yep.
Because I do think Hunter might play wide receiver at Cleveland instead of cornerback. But I think the best situation for him, if you really want to know the truth, would be to go somewhere where he could sit for a year, maybe even 2 years, because that means he's on a good team. Like, the best situation might be the Rams. Mm-hmm. You get L.A., which he'd love anyway. You have a strong head coach. You have some good veterans on there, a good young team with good leadership already in place who, are confident in themselves in the locker room. And you got some pieces that are in place as well. I think the Rams would be a great spot if they were to draft Shedeur thinking we're gonna lock in on him after a couple of years. So I don't think the Browns would be a great spot for him, but if they were to trade back into the first, they've got 2 third-round picks. They could make that trade to go from their second-round pick up into the first.
Lance Zierlein talking all things NFL draft. All right, let's talk about what everybody's on pins and needles for. You've got Ashton Jeanty going to the Cowboys at number 12. Mm-hmm. And again, look, that's from a Cowboys standpoint. I mean, you've got about a half the fans I think are okay with that. Other half are kind of not sure just yet. Want to get your thoughts on that, and then more importantly, because we had your boy Ben Albright on the other day, give me your thoughts on Brian Schottenheimer.
Well, I think Schottenheimer's respected around the league. It does come off as, a guy who is kind of I don't think milquetoast is the right word for it, but I think he is not a splashy guy. He's not gonna detract from ownership. You know what I mean? Like, Jerry's a guy over there. He's still the guy, and you're not going to have a big, vibrant personality that is going to detract from Jerry. I don't know if that's by design. It just seems like all his coaches seem to be that way for whatever reason. Garrett to McCarthy to, you name a Dallas Cowboys head coach, and they've all kind of had the same, personality, which is a little bit out of the limelight. Now, from a football standpoint, I think he's a good football coach. I think he's a solid football coach. I have no problem with the football coach. And frankly, the personality stuff, who cares? Just go win. Mm-hmm. As far as Jeanty's concerned, Jeanty's the best player in this draft. Okay. So he's the best player in this draft, but he's a running back. So I understand the idea about value, but I'll just say this. When you draft a running back, a really good running back in the first round, you got him for 7 years. You got the 5 years of the 4 years plus one option, a franchise tag and a franchise tag. Who wants running backs after 7 years anyway? Yeah. So, to get a special running back for 7 years is really, really ideal, because that is, you're getting the very best of that player. Jeanty can create for himself with power, with speed, with elusiveness. I saw him do things when his offensive line had nothing blocked up for him, and he still got to work and made it happen. He reminds me of LaDainian Tomlinson coming out of TCU, and LaDainian Tomlinson when he was with the Chargers. The same kind of make something out of nothing talent. Now, he's not the pass catcher, at least hasn't been asked to. The LaDainian was. But, when I look at the Cowboys, one of the things, the best thing that you could do, just like we saw with Josh Allen, get the running game going. Because when you get the running game going, a lot less pressure on Dak Prescott. And when you have less pressure, you can be yourself more. You can, I think the less you ask, the more you get. We saw that with Josh Allen, and I think we'll see that where in terms of decision-making and some of the efficiency, and the numbers are still really good, but he didn't have to carry the team on his back the whole time because James Cook was that good. Well, now we take a special running back, and Dak's job gets way easier, and I think that's something that, Cowboy fans should consider is this game gets a lot easier for the offense with Ashton Jeanty. I thought about giving him Tyler Booker, the big offensive lineman, to plug in for the departing Zach Martin. But I said, you know what? Why not just take the best player on the board? It's a splashy pick. Jerry will like it. But more importantly, this dude is a really good football player.
Get you out of here with this, kind of staying on the running back course. You make a very compelling point about the best player in the draft and having the control of him over 7 years. But I would be lying to you if I haven't made other mocks in my head or on paper or talked to other people, and they're very high on Omarion Hampton, both the Ohio State running backs, even a Caleb Johnson, if you would throw him in there. Why would they not take one of those guys maybe in the second round with all the needs that the Cowboys have, maybe get another positional player and still get an impact player at those other guys I just named? Or do you think that gap is larger than people are giving it credit for?
I think that gap is enormous.
Okay.
None of those guys carry a first-round grade. Jeanty carries an all-pro grade.
Okay.
So, the gap is enormous. But tell me another position. I'll give you an example because I've gone through this thought exercise.
I think a lot of Cowboys fans are looking at defensive tackle, maybe Walter Nolan or even a Will Johnson sitting out there at corner.
Right, sure.
What about a Jihad Campbell, though? What about our boy from Alabama? Because Cowboys definitely need some linebacker help as well.
Yeah, I think he's not the most fit. Look, it's a great linebacker draft in the second round. Demetrius Knight is better than Jihad Campbell. Campbell's a better athlete. Campbell can rush and cover. He's not very aggressive as a run defender.
We need that. We need a run defender bad. That's all I need to do.
Let me tell you something. Demetrius Knight will split your wig for you if you'd like. South Carolina is a big, tough, physical guy. He is exactly what Dallas would love. Okay. And he'll be there in the second round. Carson Schlesinger from
UCLA
is just one of the most from UCLA, one of the most instinctive linebackers you've got. And this is a great year for defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. It's deep. You can go 3 rounds deep. So, Omarion Hampton runs hard in a straight line, and every run is like a car crash. You've got Quinshawn Judkins. Mm-hmm. He tested great, but he averaged almost 2 yards less, 1.7 yards less per carry behind the same exact offensive line than Travion Henderson. Mm-hmm. And with let me see, the other one that you mentioned.
Caleb Johnson.
Oh, Caleb Johnson. I mean, Caleb Johnson was running running wide open holes, like the biggest holes you've ever seen. He just got done testing with a slow 10-yard split, which is something you need to burst with the small holes. So I'm basically saying I want an all-pro at running back, and this is a deep year at defensive tackle. Not great at cornerback, I will admit that. But if we're talking D tackle or linebacker, I got you in the second round. That's not a problem.
That's all I needed to hear. That's why we have Lance Zierlein on. So the people that got Omarion Hampton at 12, they need to watch the tape over again.
No. We're not doing guys. We're not doing that. We're not doing Omarion Hampton at 12.
All right, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. Look, I mean, Bobby Slowick goes from being, the next great offensive genius to booted the next year. What the hell happened in with that Houston offense this past season?
I don't think ownership loved the fact that they gave him a bump in pay after that first year. I think some of it was the offensive line wasn't a huge. I think some of the players weren't huge Bobby Slowick fans, and I don't know that that's on Bobby Slowick or not. I think there was some concern about his offense being a little too predictable. I mean, you got to remember, C.J. Stroud, D'Amico Ryans, and Bobby Slowick were all second year on the job. All three of them. People forget that. Bobby Slowick had never called plays, so he's still learning too. I thought Bobby Slowick deserved another year because, C.J. wasn't very good this year.
Right.
D'Amico had some really bad decision making.
He missed a lot. He missed some wide open throws this year.
Wide open. We saw him in person.
Wide open throws. Yeah, and I don't get it. Like, I don't know why, but, and you had the people, the apologists, like, Bobby Slowick, these route concepts. Like, you don't know anything about a route concept, so just stop, Twitter. That's enough. The guy missed the throw. That's all it is. He just missed the throw. And so I think Slowick kind of was a little bit of a scapegoat, but I also think he maybe lost some very important people on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't think his friend and the head coach, D'Amico Ryans, could save him. I think that's what happened. I thought it's unfortunate. You got offensive rookie of the year 1 year, and the next year you're gone. That's just highly unusual.
It sure was. It certainly was. Lance, we could do this all day, my man. Next time you're in Dallas, you got an open invite to come kick it with us in the studio. Great stuff from you as always. Let's talk again when we get that much closer to the draft.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Just hit me up.